Good to have you guys on, and again, thank you for all that, and for all the efforts, and very exciting new stuff. So I think obviously there are quite a lot of questions. So I'm going to go to the chat and have a look at the first one. So we have one, and I'm going to let you choose, obviously, amongst the topics for yourself. So first one is from Herwin Silva, and is it possible to choose between B tree or LSM on a table by table basis?
Yes, you can use the SQL API while defining the table. You should choose an appropriate storage engine using the engine keyword. You can also do that.
Okay.
You can also modify the configuration, like Alexander showed, using the Hokon format as well. But it's a bit more tricky, so it's better to use the SQL API.
Okay. Good, Owen. I hope that answers your question. It's a concise answer. Next, we have a slightly more general question. If we're going to start Apache Ignite implementation, excuse me, would you recommend version 2 or 3? Looks like 3 has some of the clean, pretty features we like, but the pending optimization on the SQL engine will be a concern. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I can take this one. So Ignite 3.0 is currently in alpha state, right? So it kind of depends on what you're looking for and what your timelines are. If you have an application, if there's an application which you want to use Ignite for, and go into production within a few months, then 2.x is probably the better option for now in the short term. If it's more of a looking into the future project, then you might consider 3.0. But again, 3.0 is not even in beta state yet; it's in alpha state. So it's expected that there is a active development going on, and also there might be some issues or whatnot, and some features are lacking. So it depends on your timeline, but generally, again, if you're starting an implementation of a project that you are going to go into production within several months, then for now, 2.x is probably the better version.
But maybe bear in mind with your architecture that there are some new features coming up.
Yes, exactly.
Question from Courtney Robinson. Is there a timeline for GA?
That's a great continuation. Yeah, so the current timeline is within this year. So we hope to have the GA version by the end of the year, basically. So we just released the Alpha 5, or maybe, I don't know if we released it, but it went through the vote. I saw it being accepted. So we have the Alpha 5. We also going to have a beta version, most likely in several months, which will be, ready to be tried basically within, for some of the realistic workloads. GA version is expected by the end of the year.
Great. Okay. So let's have a look back at our questions. Excuse me for stumbling a bit. We had another question there, but it's kind of similar one about LSM and B tree or B plus tree. But Rohit was saying, how do I decide when I should choose between them? So it's more about the kind of decision, how to make the decision.
Yeah. So right now, you should probably choose the LSM approach for write-heavy workloads and B plus tree approach for read-heavy workloads. But as I said, it's better to perform testing with different configurations of the engines because a B plus T approach that is used by Apache Ignite 2 is overall well suited for all kinds of workloads. So you can play around and try for yourself which is better.
Okay. So here's a question, another one. With the unified API, will .NET citizens have the same futures like ML?
Yeah, so to be honest, I'm not sure specifically about ML. I don't know if there's a fully set decision on how ML will migrate into 3.0, what will be supported, what will be not supported, whatnot. But generally speaking, if we're talking about unified APIs and support in .NET, generally speaking, the answer is yes. Of course, it's also up to the implementation of the specific clients. So it is possible, exactly like with 2.x, right? It's possible that .NET client might be lagging in some of the in support of some of the features when you compare it to the Java client at some point in time, right? And other way around as well. So the idea behind unifying the APIs is that essentially there are two things, right? So first of all, it's a unified API for server side and client side, right? So it doesn't matter where you invoke the API. On the server side or on the client side, you have the same set of interfaces and the same set of methods. And also kind of removing this ambiguity of thick clients and thick clients, which currently exist in 2.x, and just having the client that goes through a specific protocol and executes all those commands. And the protocol, the binary protocol, again, similar to what 2.x provides, will be implementable in different languages and in different platforms. We currently have the API, the Java implementation and the .NET implementation, as far as I remember. It is possible that we will have more implementations in the future, and it's always possible that some of the clients will not support certain features, and will all be just up to the community to implement them, essentially. But again, ML is a little bit different story. So if you're interested in machine learning, I would actually suggest you to write to the dev list and describe your use case, and we'll look into this. Because this is ML, just to be clear, ML is out of the scope of 3.0. It is possible that it will be added in future versions of Ignite 3, but not in the first version of Ignite 3.
Great. Thank you. Now, a question about schema migration. Asen is asking if Flyway or Liquibase should work. And I should say, at this point, as we know, you might have heard this morning, I mentioned we do have Edward later who's going to be talking about a new migration tool, which Alidium have put out. So that's going to be interesting. But for the time being, as regards Ignite 2 and Ignite 3, Flyway or Liquibase? Is there a reason why these won't work?
Yeah, I'm honestly not familiar too much with this particular tool, so folks chime in if you have anything to say. But yeah, I would say that generally speaking, I don't see any reasons for like the way we're essentially setting up the APIs and the architecture should make sure that we can integrate with data migration tools. It will essentially be SQL based for the most part, with the proper schema management. Any kind of migration becomes much easier than you would have with Ignite 2.x. Again, I cannot really talk to these particular tools, but I don't really anticipate any specific issues, even though it might require some integration with those tools, right? Which might require certain work. But architecturally speaking, I don't think there's going to be an issue.
Okay, great. We have another question. So this is again about the B+ tree and LSM. So it's obviously quite a hot topic. If we have big tables, each one with different storage strategies, which strategy will be the bottleneck?
Thank you for the question, but unfortunately, I'm not sure if I know what a storage strategy is. So if you could clarify the question a little bit, that will be very helpful to me.
I mean, I think it means that there are different tables using different implementations, but I think there is no generic single answer for this question. It depends on what the workload is.
Yeah, and what you understand under the bottleneck here. So is it
And
like reading the data, migrating the data, or writing the data?
I'm going to bring up another question now. So, do you support the fully in-memory scenario when an Ignite node uses no disk space at all? By you, obviously, we mean Ignite 3.
I think I can answer that one. So it's a yes and a no, because we have ported the in-memory implementation from Ignite 2, so we can store the data in memory. But as Valentin said, we use Raft for the replication infrastructure, and Raft protocol relies on a persistent log storage. And currently, we're still relying on that. So we're working on removing that. Removing that part, and we'll use the in-memory log storage, and then the Ignite 3 implementation will be fully in memory.
yeah, and just to add to this, on a more kind of high level, so Ignite obviously, it's known for its in-memory capabilities. It's an in-memory platform, and there will definitely be a capability to store data in memory as efficiently as possible. It's as Alex mentioned, there might be some optimizations on the Raft level. We might add specific implementation for the storage, for in-memory storage. So all that is on, it's something we might look into. But generally speaking, the disk will always be required for Ignite 3.x. It's a little bit different from Ignite 2. Like with Ignite 2.x, there is, as far as I know, at least there is an expectation that if you don't have persistence enabled, it essentially doesn't require disk at all. With Ignite 3, it's not going to be the case. At the very least, there is going to be like schema or configuration metadata and these kind of things, like internal things that are going to be stored on disk and going to be persisted for proper schema management and configuration management. The only kind of realistic implication of that is that in the cloud deployments, you need to make sure that the volumes are available after restarts. Like in Kubernetes, you should use stateful sets and these kind of things. But for the data, in-memory storage is, of course, one of the primary, storages within Ignite.
Great. Okay. Next question from Evgeny Kuvadin. What algorithm or feature do you use when you try to find a key which doesn't exist in an LSM tree?
Okay, so in the classical approach, you will have to scan over all mem tables and all SST files. That's the downside of the LSM approach. However, if I remember correctly, RocksDB uses some optimizations, one of which is to use Bloom filters, which is basically like a set of which keys a particular SST file contains. So you can this is a specific optimization to improve this particular case. It allows you to quickly understand if a key is absent in a particular SST table. So basically, you don't have to perform the binary search over it.
Okay. Thank you. Now, here's a question which is a little bit general, really, about feature parity. Jerry Hoffman says, since you mentioned that machine language is not in scope of machine learning, at least it's not in scope for now for Ignite 3, is there a long-term plan to have feature parity between Ignite 2 and 3? Or is there expectation that the two versions will serve different use cases, at least in the midterm?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think these are two different aspects, right? So there is no goal for 100% feature parity, simply because Ignite 2.x has, it has so many features and some of them are not being used at all. And these are legacy features that we most likely will not port into Ignite 3. But for the most part, we treat Ignite 3 as a next major version of the Ignite platform. So generally speaking, we expect it to support the use cases that Ignite 2 supports, but in a better way, right? So that's the goal. Feature parity is not the goal in of its own, right? But in terms of use cases, we do expect that it will eventually support the use cases that Ignite 2 supports. And like in the short term, Ignite 3.0 will definitely support the vast majority of the most popular use cases. There are things like big modules like machine learning is a very good example, which will obviously take time to migrate or whatnot. And this is something we can look into in more detail. But generally speaking, yeah, that's the approach. So the goal is to create the platform that pretty much addresses all the same use cases and potentially more use cases with better usability and the better architecture. But feature parity on its own is not the goal.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Another question from Damon Feldman. Big picture. What use case motivates the new engine and LSM storage? Are there some types of jobs that will get much faster or better?
Well, I'm not sure if I should answer that or Valentin.
Yeah, I can at least start. So historically, we added the LSM storage actually because it was easier to do. So we did want to have this kind of a architecture for pluggable storages. Just there are two reasons for this. First of all, to provide flexibility to the user, and also it just created better internal architecture for us, right? Because for example, we pretty much anticipate some optimized storage for pure in-memory workloads, for example, this kind of thing. So we wanted to have this pluggable architecture. And when we added the architecture itself and kind of the infrastructure for it, we needed the first implementation. And the choice was between adding an LSM implementation, which is based on RuxDB, essentially from scratch, but based on RuxDB, or migrating it migrating B+3 implementation from Ignite to the X. And at that point, it was several months ago. Just doing the LSM was easier from implementation perspective than migrating B+3. That's why we started with LSM, and now we migrated B+3. Just simply took more time. In terms of workloads, again, Alex pretty much I think nailed it in the presentation. So general rule of thumb is that read-heavy workloads are suitable for B+3. Write-heavy workloads are suitable for LSM. But obviously there are exceptions and there are nuances, and it's always better to to do rigorous testing of your own workload, your own applications, and see how it behaves.
Great. Okay. Moving on then. This one is about transactional SQL. So what's the plan for transactional SQL?
Well, I think I could take that one. The answer is yes and no. The yes for Ignite 3, because we have an ability to change everything we wanted to. And support for transactional SQL is not only a matter of execution engine, it requires changes in transactional layer and then storage layers as well. So that is, we're going to support this feature in Ignite 3, and for now we don't have such plan to support this feature in Ignite 2.
Okay. There's some questions here which might be a little simple, but are there examples of the query the old engine couldn't cope with, but that the new one can?
Well, this one mine too. For example, every query with subquery and then aggregate in that subquery. And well, for example, you want to query all the employees which salary is above an average level for all employees. So it's basically looks like select all from employee where salary less than, and subquery select average salary from employee. So both an outer query and a subquery requires by a one iteration of MapReduce execution each that give us 2 iteration in total. And this is an example of query which can which the old engine can handle. So but the new engine will cope with this one easily.
Okay. And what about examples of features which have not yet been ported to the new query engine?
Oh, the first one came to my mind is partition pruning, probably. Yep, we don't have this one in the new engine yet.
Say again, partition?
Partition pruning. This is a type of query where you could determine a particular partition by a query predicate and map the query only on this partition and not scan the rest of the table.
Okay.
So basically, like if you aggregate, collocate by a customer, for example, and then you aggregate some data for that particular customer, right? So you basically, in the most optimal way, you have to you can go to that just a single node to that single partition and aggregate the data there. But without the implementation, I guess we would just broadcast the query.
Yes, that's true. For now.
Okay. Good. So moving on, we've still got one or two questions. Moving on to the CLI. And this is certainly of great interest to me as well. How does the CLI application communicate with the Ignite 3 node? So what is the, does it use the same protocol as the client? What's the, or is another node? How does it work?
Yeah, thanks for an excellent question. I think like most modern CLI applications, the Ignite 3 CLI uses REST to communicate with Ignite 3 nodes. I'd like to add that the client is auto-generated from the Open API specification provided by Ignite 3. It means that in case you'd like to use the REST client, you can just grab the API specification from the GitHub and generate the client for any language you'd prefer. This is also available since Alpha 5 version. So that's it.
Okay, but you say you mean you can generate the CLI in any language?
No, I mean you can generate the REST client for your application and use this and communicate with Ignite 3 node as it CLI does. Like if you
right, okay.
want to extend it, you can.
So you could effectively write your own CLI.
Yep.
But you wouldn't want to do that because you've already written the perfect one.
Yeah.
I think it's more, it allows you to integrate with other tools essentially. So you have the REST layer and you have the CLI, which uses the CLI, but you can use REST directly, right, which might be useful for some purpose.
Right. Are there any plans to support the advanced auto-completion in REPL mode, not just in static options and commands?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes, now you can now you have to type something manually. For example, any cluster configuration key like rocks.regions sometimes it hurts to remember the exact configuration key. Yeah, and in Alpha 5 version, you still need to type it from the start up to the end. It seems like this manual typing can be improved with completion. So you just type RO, hit tab, then RE, hit tab, and get the full configuration key in your terminal, rocksdb.regents. I hope this feature will be available in the next versions. Yes, and many more advanced completions in SQL, dynamic schema fetching, and adding some types hints. Yes, that's in plans.
Okay, great. Going back to the questions in the chat, there's something here from Rohit, which might be a question, but it might also be an answer. So Rohit Dharampal, just please add if you feel you need to at the chat. But is the question here, can you use third-party persistence for the cache store? And if that is a question, could you answer it?
Yeah, so this is obviously one of the use cases, right? So I don't think we will have like a cache store specifically in a way it's designed currently. Again, like we're not going for 100% feature parity here. But obviously integration with other stores will be required, at least eventually. I don't know, Alex, if you want to add something to this, if this is maybe part of this, pluggable storage thing or not. But that's kind of a generic answer from me.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, but I would like to add a little bit regarding the fact that it is possible currently to add a new or third-party persistence tool due to the design of Apache Ignite 3, and we are currently working on formalizing the storage interface, but it can only be done by contributing to the project. So I don't know if we have any plans for pluggability in that regard.
Right. Okay. I think that answers the question. So I'm just checking. Rohit's now saying, is it on the roadmap? It's obviously a feature he really wants. So it looks like we're running out of questions.
Yeah, just Jeremy, I think I'm just looking at the some information I have. So I think it's out of the scope of 3.0. It's again one of those features that will likely be added down the road, like 3.1, 3.2, and so on. But again, if if there is any specific interest in terms of the use cases that you want to be supported or whatnot, always feel free to write to the dev list or user list, and we'll look into this in more detail. And I guess that's a generic suggestion for any further concerns or questions.
All right. Great. Well, guys, I think that about wraps it up. Very exciting. Thank you all for your hard work and for your presentations and for the Q&A, and congratulations on all of the hard work.